Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Chunglo, Director of Veteran Services here in Arlington. I'd like to thank you all for coming out this morning to participate in our ceremony. I'd like to introduce our official party. Reverend Leah Lyman Waldron, Mr. Adam Chapdelaine, Town Manager, Mr. Daniel Dunn, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, State Representative Sean Garbley, and Lieutenant Colonel Michael Strobel, United States Marine Corps, retired. Go ahead and you can have a seat. Take a seat. I would like to start our ceremony this morning with the words spoken by President Ronald Reagan on this day in 1985.
Some time back, I received in the name of our country the bodies of 4 Marines who had died while on active duty. I said then that there is a special sadness that accompanies the death of a serviceman, for we're never quite good enough to them. Not really, we can't be, because what they gave us is beyond our powers to repay. And so when a serviceman dies, it's a tear in the fabric, a break in the whole, and all we can do is remember. It is, in a way, an odd thing to honor those who died in defense of our country, in defense of us, in wars far away. The imagination plays a trick. We see these soldiers in our mind as old and wise. We see them as something like the founding fathers, grave and gray-haired. But most of them were boys when they died, and they gave up 2 lives, the one they were living and the one they would have lived. When they died, they gave up their chance to be husbands and fathers and grandfathers. They gave up their chance to be revered old men. They gave up everything for our country, for us. We owe them a debt we can never repay. All we can do is remember them and what they did and why they had to be brave for us.
Would you please rise? The Marine Corps JROTC unit from Massachusetts Regional Vocational Technical School will now present our colors. Mr. John Flood will now sing our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Reverend Waldron is a pastor at Park Ave Congregational Church. Originally from Chicago, she attended Wellesley College before spending 10 years in the South. In Atlanta, she received her Master's of Divinity from Candler School of Theology at Emory University. She and her family moved to Arlington last August and have enjoyed being back in the Boston area, getting to know the town and our residents. At this time, Reverend Waldron will now deliver our invocation.
Let us pray. Holy One, giver of all good gifts, source of life, we have gathered here to remember those who have died in wars and conflicts as they served in our military. We have come to mourn the loss of their lives, each and every one too early, and to acknowledge the pain of their families, friends, colleagues, and communities, pain that ripples forward to this day, no matter how distant its origin. With solemn ceremony, we honor the lives of the fallen, but as we honor them for giving what Abraham Lincoln called the last full measure of devotion, let us also acknowledge before you the sinfulness of war, the ways in which it wounds your children and your creation, not just the destruction of lives, but the damage to spirits, psyches, bodies, families, landscapes, and nations, ours and others. And let us acknowledge that these damages are borne unequally by persons of color and people in poverty. On this Memorial Day, we plead for your help in becoming people of peace and justice, who value life above power or influence, and who strive to build a world where all people are treated with dignity and compassion, a world where competing interests are resolved without violence and war becomes a distant dream. Help us in this way to repay the last full measure of devotion paid at such a high price by our loved ones and fellow country people whose memories we honor today. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Please be seated. I would like to acknowledge and thank the Board of Selectmen, Joe and Joan Connors, who are here representing our Gold Star parents, the members of the Arlington Veterans Council, the members of our local military service organizations, and all veterans in attendance today. I'd like to thank the very talented members of the Arlington High School for providing the music prior to our ceremony today. I'd like to thank the Marine Corps JROTC unit from Massachusetts Vocational Regional Technical School for displaying our nation's colors today, and also to Mr. John Flood for singing our national anthem. It is important to remember that our quest for liberty began here in our own backyard. The Revolutionary War's first battle, now largely forgotten, was fought here in the village of Menotomy. In addition to the Revolutionary War, Arlington residents have served in the Lebanon Campaign, the Grenada Campaign, the Panama Campaign, and the Persian Gulf War. Joe and Joan Connors lost their son, Navy Lieutenant SEAL John Patrick Connors, at the age of 25, while he was engaged in combat operations during the Panama Campaign. Arlington veterans and their families have paid a cost in every battle. In addition to these wars, Arlington residents have served in the following: World War I, the war to end all wars. This year marks the 100th anniversary of World War I, when the United States was engaged in combat operations throughout Europe. 980 Arlington residents served during World War I. During World War I, troops were exposed to the latest military technology of the day. They faced new weapons such as tanks, airplanes, machine guns, heavy artillery, and poison gas. The 26th Infantry, nicknamed the Yankee Division, was the first full U.S. division to deploy directly overseas after the U.S. entered World War I on April 16, 1917. Another notable Massachusetts unit from World War I was Company L of the National Guard's 372nd Infantry Regiment, which was comprised entirely of black soldiers from Boston and Cambridge. All major hospitals throughout the Commonwealth organized medical units that deployed to Europe in 1917. Additionally, over 1,000 Massachusetts residents joined the American Field Service Corps, staffing ambulance units for French and British armies. In total, more than 189,000 Massachusetts residents served during World War I, and Massachusetts paid a heavy price with 5,775 combat-related deaths. Today, we are honored to have Mr. Bob Coffey in our attendance, representing his father, Christopher P. Coffey, who served in World War I, and he was a lifelong resident of Arlington. PFC Christopher Coffey served in the Army, assigned to Army Battery D, 38th Artillery Company, from July 8, 1917 to December 9, 1918. World War II. From 1939 to 1945, 7,245 Arlington residents served in the military. The casualties sustained during World War II were unprecedented and brought the world closest to the term total warfare. It's estimated that by the end of combat operations, over 60 million military personnel and civilians were killed. During the war, the entire country joined the war effort by collecting and donating metal, rubber goods, and other items needed for the war effort. Food, gasoline, motor vehicles, and other commercial products were eliminated or rationed. For our first time in the history, women entered the workforce and staffed manufacturing plants. And as a result, the iconic Rosie the Riveter was born. Our troops were mostly of high school age. They left home and family for years at a time with limited access to mail-in packages from home. Following the conclusion of the war, they returned home and resumed their daily lives, seeking nothing in return. Their action demonstrates why this generation is referred to as the greatest generation. The Korean War, from 1950 to 1955, commonly referred to as the Forgotten War. During this conflict, 2,077 Arlington residents served in the military. Is the Korean War still a forgotten war? The answer is still up for debate. But our Korean War veterans proudly answered the call to our nation and proudly served. Those who fought in Korea demonstrated courage and sacrifice that is required of all military service personnel. When they returned home, there were no victory parades. Not until New York City held a parade in 1991. This conflict, referred to as a police action, was not congressionally recognized as a war until 1998. Nearly 1.8 million Americans fought in Korea, and over 36,500 died. The Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War era, from November 1955 to April 1975, 2,297 Arlington residents served their country. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. Some of our Vietnam veterans were drafted, while others volunteered to serve their nation. These veterans engaged in combat operations thousands of miles away from home. When they returned home, they found themselves engaged with a new enemy, an American public that shunned them for their military service. This marked a significant change in America's history and how Vietnam veterans were viewed. The struggle of these veterans continued for years, but as a result of their efforts, our Vietnam veterans spearheaded a change in America's attitudes towards war and the military. Through their dedication and education, our country has matured. Our citizens understand that they have the right to protest conflicts, but at the same time, support the troops charged with defending our freedom. Would all Vietnam veterans in attendance today please stand? On behalf of a nation you proudly served, I would like to say thank you for your service and welcome home. The global war on terrorism. Since September 11, 2001, 379 Arlington residents have served in ongoing military operations throughout the global war on terrorism era. Over 15 designated military operations have been conducted since September 11, 2001. Since the U.S. went to war in Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003, approximately 2.5 million active duty, reserve, and National Guard service members have been deployed. More than a third, or roughly 825,000, have been deployed more than once. According to Department of Defense records, over 400,000 service members have been deployed 3 or more times. Nearly 37,000 service members have been deployed more than 5 times. Of this number, 10,000 have been from National Guard or reserve units. This has been an unprecedented demand on a small population of military personnel and their families. Secretary of Defense General James Mattis wrote in his book, Warriors and Citizens, "Unless you had a family member serving in the military or knew a family member with a deployed service member, the majority of Americans found it hard to relate to military families." General Mattis goes on to say, "Our work is appreciated, of that I am certain. There isn't a town or a city where I visit where people do not convey to me their great pride in what we do. But I fear that they do not know us. I fear that they do not comprehend the full weight of the burden we carry or the price we pay when we return from battle." These words summarize the differences between civilian and military cultures and the challenges in bridging these divides. Additionally, there are more than 20 service members that commit suicide each day. We don't have a full understanding of why this trend remains unchanged, but hopefully we can reverse this cycle through a better understanding of issues that face returning veterans, their families, and how veterans see themselves reintegrating back into society. At this time, I would like to invite Mr. Adam Chapdelaine, Arlington's town manager, to offer his remarks.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to say thank you to Jeff and thank you to the Veterans Council for once again organizing and putting together such a fitting tribute to commemorate Memorial Day. So if I could ask for a round of applause for the Veterans Council, if you don't mind standing. And thank you to all of you for coming out today. Every year I feel like the turnout at this ceremony has become larger and larger. That's a tribute to the members of the community coming out to really celebrate and commemorate Memorial Day with the community. So my remarks will be brief, but when I thought about what I wanted to say this morning, I came back to what I think I've said in years past, that we all, or many of us, think of Memorial Day as a time that's a day to signify kicking off the summer season, or a time to spend some fun time with family and friends. And while it certainly is that, and should be that for many of us, it first and foremost is a time for us to reflect on the tremendous sacrifice of so many brave men and women, as Jeff has just described, who fought and sacrificed their lives to provide us the freedoms that we all enjoy. So while I hope that we can all get a little break in the weather and today spend some time with family and friends, I ask that all of us take a moment, and I think we're all doing it because we're here today together, to reflect upon that sacrifice and really appreciate the freedom that that sacrifice has earned us. So thank you.
I'd like to invite Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Dan Dunn, to offer his remarks.
I would like to start by thanking Director Chunglo for his work through the town through the years, and particularly his organization today and his remarks that he started with us with. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen, thank you all for coming here. As you all know, the town of Arlington takes its name from the Arlington National Cemetery. The first military burial at the cemetery was in 1864 during the height of the Civil War. It was just 3 years later, in 1867, that our town chose to take the name. 1 year after that, the first Memorial Day celebration was held. It was called Decoration Day back then. Just as we do today, the graves of soldiers were decorated with flowers and flags. 1868 was the first year that Decoration Day was broadly designated across the country, and it was the first time that Decoration Day was celebrated at the Arlington National Cemetery. So here we are in Arlington, Mass., 150 years after the first Memorial Day in the other Arlington. The speaker on that day was James Garfield, a major general in the Civil War who would later become the 20th President of the United States. General Garfield said, "I am oppressed with a sense of the impropriety of uttering words on this occasion. If silence is ever golden, it must be here besides the graves of 15,000 men, whose lives were more significant than speech, and whose death was a poem, the music of which can never be sung." Garfield feared that his words were insufficient in honoring the dead, and he knew that words would never be adequate to the dedication shown by the fallen soldiers around him. He said, "We do not know one promise these men made, one pledge they gave, one word they spoke, but we do know they summed up and perfected, by one supreme act, the highest virtues of men and citizens. For love of country they accepted death, and thus resolved all doubts, and made immortal their patriotism and their virtue." Words may not be sufficient, but we do not have to rely entirely on words to honor our fallen heroes. We have stories to help us. A story is more than words. A story helps us connect, helps us feel, and helps us understand. With us today, we have many who have lost friends and family in the line of duty. No words are adequate for their grief or consolation, but they have stories, and we can listen to them. Through them, we can know those who died in service to our country a little bit better. I'm pleased that Lieutenant Colonel Strobel is here with us to tell us his story, and that of Private First Class Chance Phelps. Through these stories, let us celebrate Memorial Day and celebrate the lives and deaths who gave their all for our country. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Representative Sean Garbly to offer his remarks.
Good morning. First, I would also like to thank Jeff Chunglo for all of the work he does on behalf of veterans across the town of Arlington, but also the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Jeff serves as the president of the Veteran Officers Council across the Commonwealth, and so we really, truly appreciate all of the work you do on behalf of veterans across our state. I'd also like to thank our Veterans Council here in Arlington, but specifically our good friend Jeff Melton, who just returned home from serving our country overseas, leaving his children and his wife, and we are so proud to have him back. Thank you, Jeff, for your service. But we're also thankful for your service as an educator in the town of Arlington. We hope you return very soon if you haven't already. It's an honor to be here to join my partners in government, Dan Dunn from the Board of Selectmen. I also see we have Joe Curo, Diane Mahan, Kevin Greeley, and John Hurd, the entire members of the Board of Selectmen. It's an honor to have all of you folks here in attendance. As Jeff mentioned in his speech, he talked about the difficulties that veterans have reintegrating into society, receiving benefits, mental illness, homelessness. There are many challenges that veterans face. And when I think of the role of veterans, I truly believe every single day it is the right day to say thank you for your service, as we specifically do on Veterans Day. But today, on this day, we pay tribute and remember those who did not return, who did not come home. Those individuals as young as a young boy at Arlington High School, who didn't have the chance to go to the senior prom, who didn't have the chance to graduate from high school, who didn't have the chance to fall in love, to have a family. They literally gave everything for this country and didn't come home. So today, we remember, and that memory is so critical. I remember about 15 years ago, Massachusetts and Boston had the honor of hosting the Congressional Medal of Honor recipients, their convention. Massachusetts has had the honor of hosting them on 2 occasions. The first occasion, I was young, I was probably 16 years old, and I had the chance to go to the State House and to watch these literal giants who were honored for their incredible service come and speak to us, and there were about 500 members of the public who turned out. And when the event ended, an elderly woman came up to me and grabbed my hand and said, "Sean, can you help my husband out to the bus? We're all going to dinner." And that gentleman's name was Donald E. Rudolph. He was a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient who received his recognition for his service in World War II. So as I helped him and Helen, his wife, onto the bus, I went to leave, and he grabbed my hand and pulled me next to him, and he looked at his wife and said, "Isn't it great that our grandson was able to join us for dinner?" And so I was a little nervous being on a bus filled with Congressional Medal of Honor recipients because I had absolutely no business being on that bus. But as we went to dinner, and as I had dinner with literally 70 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients at a young age of 16, something struck me. And what struck me was I was hoping to hear the stories of valor and everything that they did to receive that Nobel recognition, not one single Congressional Medal of Honor recipient used the word I, me, my. They didn't talk about their service, they talked about other people's service. Specifically, they talked about the service of their friends who never came home. Donald all night talked about his friends who didn't come home during World War II. As I left that dinner and a couple of decades later, I think about that. And I think specifically how Donald Rudolph is not here anymore. He passed away about 10 years ago, and he is not here to share the stories of the young men who didn't come home from World War II. And as we get further and further from war, we find memory to be more important now than ever before, because the stories of our bravest men who never came home, remember, who never finished high school and gave everything to this country, there's no one left to tell their stories. And that is why this day is more important than ever before. And their stories need to be told, whether just through sharing stories like the one I just said, or through movies, or pictures, or books, or podcasts, or Facebook, whatever mechanism you want to use. Telling that story is so important, because when you tell that story, the memory never fades, and we will always remember what each and every individual did for this country when they didn't come home. Happy Memorial Day. Thank you.
So I'm very pleased that Lieutenant Colonel Strobel accepted my invitation to be present today and participate in our ceremony. So his biography is as follows. Dr. Michael Strobel is a Deputy Director for Manpower Plans and Policy Division, Manpower and Reserve Affairs, and Assistant Director with the development and implementation of military and civilian manpower programs, including Marine Corps goals and objectives, and serves as the authority on all Marine Corps plans and policies regarding military-civilian manpower issues. The Manpower Plans and Policy Division is responsible for formulating Marine Corps plans and policies regarding military and civilian manpower issues that impact 182,000 active military members, 38,600 selected reserves, 69,650 individual ready reserves, and 18,200 appropriated fund civilians worldwide. Michael Strobel enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1983 and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in December of 1987 and served around the world in various duties as a field artilleryman. He deployed with both the 13th and 15th Marine Expeditionary Units, special operations capable, and served in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait as an artillery platoon commander with the 11th Marines during Operation Desert Storm. Other operational tours include Battery Command at the 12th Marines and Battalion Operations Officer and Regimental Fire Direction Officer at 10th Marines. Other supporting tours include Instructor and Staff Platoon Commander at the Basic School, Assistant Operations Officer, Total Force Structure Division, and Head Officer Distribution Branch at Headquarters Marine Corps, Manpower and Reserve Affairs. Retiring from the Marine Corps as a Lieutenant Colonel in 2007, Dr. Strobel accepted a position as an Operations Research Analyst in the Office of the Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon. While serving at the Pentagon, he was the lead analyst on military manpower and compensation issues, as well as the Defense Health Program. He was appointed to the Senior Executive Service and assumed his current duties as Deputy Director, Manpower Plans and Policy Division in September 2016. Dr. Strobel holds a Bachelor's of Business Administration degree from Colorado Mesa University, a Master's of Business Administration degree from Everett University, a Master's of Science degree with distinction from the Naval Postgraduate School, and a PhD in Economics from George Mason University. It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Strobel.
Thank you. Wow, thanks a lot. It's wonderful to be here. It's really an honor to be here with you today. Before I start, I want to thank Jeff and Diane for the invitation to join you today and for the great hospitality. We went to Fenway Park yesterday, which for a baseball fan and a sports fan was a day I'll never forget, my first time at Fenway. So thanks so much. You are, both of you, great ambassadors for the city of Arlington. You guys should be very proud of Jeff and Diane. Yeah. It's a thrill for me to be here. My daughter goes to Wellesley. Yeah, go blue. And my son will be a freshman at Emerson this coming fall. So it seems like my family, one at a time, is leaving to come to Boston. So if you guys see my wife wandering around, you'll know I'm the last one left, and I need to get up here as soon as possible. I want to thank all of you for taking the time on a holiday weekend to come here and be part of this celebration and a time to remember. And you know what I really want to do is I want to thank the kids that are here today. If you're under 12 years old, stand up for a second, please. Thank you. Listen, I know there might be some other things that you guys would rather be doing, but I really appreciate that you youngsters, I sound like an old man now, that you young ladies and gentlemen are here with us today just for a little while. We'll get you out of here in a minute, but I just want to thank all of you. And I need one of you. I need one of these kids to be a helper. Somebody want to help me with something? Not you? Okay. Hey, listen. Never. Yeah, come up. You can come on up. Come here. This guy's going to be a Marine. I learned early on. You can come up. Come on up here. Come here. How are you? What's your name? John, you want to sit in my chair for a minute? Okay. All right. This is the reason. This is the reason freedom's important to us. Is this generation here? So I want John to represent all of the kids that are here today in a place of honor, because to me, this is why our veterans do what they do, and I know. I hear occasionally stories about this generation, they're this or they're that, and I tell you what, these kids are just as good as any generation that's gone before them, and I can tell looking at John and his buddies out here that we're going to be just fine as a country. So John, welcome. Okay. Now, John, you have an important job in a minute. I'm going to need you to remind me of something. Remember I said old man? I need you to remind me of something in a minute. Now, this guy I like, he shook his head no when I asked for a volunteer. That is smart. That's the first thing you learn in the Marine Corps. Okay. What I want to do today is maybe give you a unique perspective on our nation's veterans, and especially those that we're here to memorialize today. As we're all aware, and as Jeff mentioned earlier, we've been in this global war on terror now for 17 years, which is more than 4 times longer than we were actively engaged in World War II. And we cannot ever forget that this, just like World War II, it's a struggle for the very values and the freedoms that we cherish. And it's also a struggle against a ruthless and a fanatical enemy. And it's, in my mind, because of the fanaticism of our current enemies, that the primary function of our military, which is deterrence, doesn't really work like it used to. Deterrence is when you combine the manpower, the training, the equipment, the doctrine, and the national will to create a force that stands ready to win battles. And by that very presence and capability and will, you are able to deter conflicts without ever actually having to go to battle. That's, in my mind, the true purpose of our military. It's not to win battles, it's to prevent them through strength. But the trouble is, deterrence presumes a love of life on the part of your adversary, and that's something that I'm not sure our current adversaries really possess. When their goal is to die in the pursuit of their goals, deterrence doesn't work like it used to. So, in addition to deterrence now, what our current service members have to do is what we in the Marine Corps call locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. That's how you win the global war on terror. And to do that, it requires more than just training and manpower and equipment. It requires a certain resolve. And this resolve is something that our service members have inherited from generation after generation of veteran, and especially those that we're here to memorialize this weekend. Our current service members have inherited this legacy of valor that is what we call a force multiplier. It makes us stronger just by its mere presence. And I look at these Marines back here, and I'm reminded of a time I was asked if Marines are afraid of anything. And my answer is yes, they most certainly are. What Marines are afraid of is of letting down the legacy of valor that they've inherited from generation after generation of veteran, and especially those that we remember this weekend. And I speak for Marines, but I know it goes equally true for all branches of the military. When I tell you how desperate those who are currently serving are to uphold and to be worthy of the legacy of those that have sacrificed so much for our country. So in my mind, and here's what I think might be the unique message that maybe you haven't thought of before, but in my mind, our veterans who have sacrificed everything, they continue to serve. Their service did not end when they came home and were buried. Their service continues because they are that force multiplier. They are that legacy that allows our current service members to carry the fight to the enemy. And this legacy is something that our current adversaries, I don't think, can even understand, and I am certain they cannot replicate it. It is unique to America, and it's a legacy that is sustained by gatherings such as this all across the country today. So I thank you again for taking the time to be here today to sustain that legacy. By your mere presence today, you are contributing to that force multiplying effect that our countless heroic veterans have handed down to those who are currently serving. So that's my message today. Now, you're supposed to remind me of something, right? Okay, luckily I remembered. All right, you having fun? Good. Okay, I want to talk about fun. It's my closing thought to you. Memorial Day, it's a day to pause and reflect, and especially if you've lost a loved one who served our country. I think about my father today, who served in the Marine Corps from 1958 to 1962. Some of you, I think, are aware of the movie Taking Chance. My dad, he died unexpectedly the week before it premiered, and he didn't get to see it. But be that as it may, I think of my father today on Memorial Day. But I want us to also have fun today, because that is what our veterans have fought for, and that is for us to exercise the freedoms that they have protected. That is how we honor them. So I wanted to have a smile today. I wanted to see some of these young men and women that are with us today, and I want us, after pausing this morning to reflect on everything that we've been given through valorous sacrifice. I want us to go out, I want us to smile, I want us to hug each other, and have a great day, because that is why our freedom was secured for us, is so that we can live the lives that we would like to lead. Any questions? All right. Well, again, thank you. It's been a real honor to be here. Jeff, thanks so much. I'm humbled and honored to share this day with you, and I hope to see a lot of you throughout the rest of today. Thank you very much.
Special round of applause for John. Today we honor Corporal Vincent Gilberto, who served in the Marine Corps from September 1943 to March 1946. Corporal Gilberto participated in combat operations on the Philippine island of Leyte. The island of Leyte is 110 miles long and 40 miles wide. Combat operations that began on October 17th finally ended on December 26th, 1944, for a total of 71 days of combat operations. High mountain peaks, as well as jagged outcroppings, ravines, and caves typical of volcanic islands, offered significant challenges for combat operations. Additionally, the timing of the invasion late in the year would force troops to contend with monsoon rains and a typhoon that struck the region on November 8th. Vincent passed away on April 5th. His body was cremated, and his remains rest at home with his wife, Lucy. The Gilberto family will scatter the ashes of Vincent and his wife, Lucy, together following her passing. Since Vincent was not interred, I am honored that Mrs. Lucy Gilberto is here today so that we can pay tribute to her husband's service and acknowledge her sacrifices as a military spouse. Lucy's family and spouses are also in attendance today. Anthony and Deborah Gilberto, Carmela and Jeffrey Boutine, Marjorie Gilberto and Robert Bernard, Anthony and Maureen Saluta, Lucy's grandchildren, Joseph and John Gilberto, as well as Vincent's brother and his spouse, Salvatore and Rosita Gilberto, are also present for our ceremony today. As part of every military funeral, the casket is draped with the American flag. A rifle volley is rendered, taps is played, and the flag is then ceremoniously folded and presented to the family. Would you please stand for the rendering of taps? Please be seated. As part of the flag folding ceremony, the flag is folded 13 times. Each fold represents or symbolizes an aspect of life, religion, or country. These representations have been part of our military tradition dating back to the Revolutionary War era. The first fold represents a symbol of life. The second fold represents our belief in eternal life. The third fold represents honor and remembrance of veterans departing our ranks. The fourth fold represents a turn to God in wartime and in peace. The fifth fold represents a tribute to our country. The sixth fold represents devotion felt in our hearts, pledging allegiance to the flag. The seventh fold represents a tribute to our armed forces. The eighth fold represents a tribute to the soldier and his mother. The ninth fold represents a tribute to womanhood, recognizing traits of faith, love, loyalty, and devotion. The 10th fold represents a tribute to fathers. The 11th fold glorifies the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The 12th fold represents the Holy Trinity, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost. And the 13th fold, represented by the Canton field of blue with white stars, reminds us of our nation's motto, "In God we trust." As we pay tribute to our fallen heroes, let us engage and educate our families, friends, and neighbors not present today. Share the true meaning of Memorial Day and the sacrifices made by our loved ones. May we walk in the memory of those who forever hold the burden of our freedoms. Please stand and join me in a moment of silence. At this time, Reverend Waldron will now deliver our benediction.
I, like many of you, have had the great privilege to be related to and to be friends with and co-workers with folks who have served in the military, including to be roommates with one of the people that Jeff mentioned who had been deployed over 5 times in Iraq. But on this Memorial Day, as every Memorial Day, the first person that comes to mind is Private First Class Sean Edwards, who was in my high school class and who never came home. Our generation was the first to be deployed in the global war on terror. And as I think about the movie screening we'll have this afternoon and Lieutenant Colonel Strobel's experience, I think what it must have been like for his mother to receive his effects and receive the flag. And so I'll leave you with the words of another mother, Julia Ward Howe, the activist, abolitionist, and poet who founded Mother's Day in 1870, not as a way so much to honor mothers as a movement to end the wars that had killed so many mothers' children. She envisioned a world where, quote, "We women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our children to be trained to injure theirs. We must take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, each bearing after their own kind the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God. Go in peace." Amen.
Please be seated. So this concludes our ceremony. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for their remarks today. For those of you who would like to proceed to Mount Pleasant Cemetery for our wreath-laying ceremonies, we'll gather in front of the Town Hall and proceed to the cemetery. For those of you that do not wish to walk to the cemetery, you can board a van outside and they'll take us right to the cemetery. The police department and cemetery staff have asked that we limit the number of vehicles entering the cemetery. So I ask that you please board the van that will be waiting out front, and they'll return everyone here to the Town Hall following the wreath-laying ceremonies. As a reminder, this afternoon at 2 p.m. at the Regent Theater, we'll have a free screening of the movie Taking Chance. And following the screening, Lieutenant Colonel Strobel will be present and will conduct a question and answer period following the movie. So again, thank you everyone for attending today's ceremony. Thank you very much. During the battles fought throughout the Civil War, a total of 2.2 million Union soldiers conducted military operations from 1861 to 1865. Over 204,000 soldiers lost their lives during these battles, while over 476,000 suffered battle injuries. Additionally, there were over 413 non-combat deaths. During the Spanish-American War, conducted from 1889 to 1901, over 306,000 men and women served our country. Of this number, 362 lost their lives, while over 1,600 received combat-related injuries, and there were over 2,600 non-combat deaths. This time I'll place a wreath. Eugene O'Neill will perform our ceremonial volley. The Monogamy Minutemen will render honors. Davy will now render taps. This time we'll proceed to the World War I, II, and Korea lots.
Especially around the fire headquarters.
Right, your left, left. Yeah, Goshen.
Is that
Yeah.
closer?
Okay. All right. During World War I, 4.7 million service members served from 1917 to 1918. Over 53,500 lost their lives, and over 204,000 suffered combat injuries, and there were over 63,000 non-combat deaths. During World War II, 16.1 million service members served from 1941 to 1945. Over 293,000 lost their lives, over 670,000 sustained combat injuries, and there were over 115,000 non-combat deaths. During the Korean War, 5.7 million service members served from 1950 to 1953. Over 33,700 lost their lives, over 103,000 received combat injuries, and there were over 10,000 non-combat deaths. In honor of the 100th anniversary of World War I, Mr. Bob Coffey, son of World War I veteran Christopher Coffey, will lay the ceremonial wreath in honor of his father and all of our fallen World War I veterans. Salvatore Gilberto will lay the wreath honoring his brother, Marine Corporal Vincent Gilberto, in honor of our fallen World War II and Korean War veterans. From the Marine Corps League will perform our ceremonial volley. Catherine Davey will perform taps. now proceed to our Vietnam veteran lot.
Left. Left, slow down. Left, right. Left. 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 Left, right. Left. 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 Left, right. Gotta keep it straight, boys. Up here, we're gonna do a slight guide right. That's good. The music in the back end is really long.
I don't like seeing it.
During the Vietnam War, 8.7 million service members served from 1961 to 1973. Over 47,400 lost their lives. Over 153,000 sustained combat injuries, and there were over 10,700 non-hostile deaths. Mr. Bill Hayner will now lay a wreath in honor of our fallen Vietnam veterans. Menominee Minutemen will render honor. From the Marine Corps League, we'll now perform our ceremonial volley. Catherine Davey will render tap. We'll now proceed to our final veteran lot, the Global War on Terrorism. Over 15 designated military operations have been conducted since September 11, 2001. Approximately 2.5 million members of the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and related Reserve and National Guard units have been deployed since 9/11/2001. Over 7,000 military personnel have been killed, and over 50,600 military personnel have been wounded. This time, Chief Petty Officer Jeffrey Melton will lay our wreath honoring our Global War on Terrorism era veterans. The Menominee Minutemen will render honors. Eugene O'Neill from the Marine Corps League will perform the ceremonial volley. Catherine Davey will now render taps. Firefighter Brian Sweeney, will perform Amazing Grace. The patriots who are laid rest in Arlington were fighting for many things. For their families, for their flag, but above all, they were fighting for us. Let us never forget the ultimate sacrifice these brave men and women have paid. Let us remember our Gold Star families who have lost loved ones to illness, injury, and combat. Those who stood strong through uncertainty and whose resilience, dedication, and commitment to their loved ones continue to shine and serve as support for others during their darkest hours. Let us remember the men and women currently conducting military operations around the globe and the Blue Star families awaiting their safe return. I ask you to remember and honor the missing as well. Our nation remains committed to efforts to locate, identify, and repatriate those men and women who have not returned home. In closing, I'd like to thank Lieutenant Colonel Mike Strobel for his participation in our ceremony today. I'd like to acknowledge all of our veterans present today, our elected officials, the Arlington Police Department and their Honor Guard, the Arlington Fire Department and their Honor Guard, the support from the Police and Fire Department, Arlington's Department of Public Works, and the staff here at Mount Pleasant Cemetery. I would also like to thank all of our volunteers that participated in placing flags on our veterans' graves here at Mount Pleasant Cemetery, and those who contributed all their efforts to make this ceremony a special event. But most importantly, I'd like to thank all of the residents of Arlington for your continued support. Thank you very much. And as a reminder, at 2 p.m. this afternoon, we'll have a screening of the movie Taking Chance with a question and answer period following the movie with Lieutenant Colonel Strobel. So again, thank you very much for participating in the ceremony today. Enjoy the rest of your day.